I've been a landscape professional for 47 years now, but if I had to completely start over, I would not start at the nursery. Many people think landscaping is only about choosing the right plants. It's not. It's about understanding spaces, your soil, and your needs. So if I had to start from scratch, here is exactly how I would learn landscaping and the mistakes I would never make again. So if I was to start over, the first thing I would make sure I thought about, which was a revelation to me when I learned about it. I had already been studying landscape architecture for years when it finally dawned on me, because of some of my professors kind of dragging it out of us, that the most important part of the profession is creating space. I think I would start with that and what that means and how you create space, and that you want to create spaces that meet your needs and make it so your life is better when the design is done. We start out by envisioning this very practically. Rather than start, I want it to look like Hawaii, or I want to use native plants. Before we talk about what it's going to look like, we think about how it's going to serve us. It's important that these spaces we create are aligned with how we're going to live. The great challenge for the garden designer shouldn't be to make the garden natural, but to make the garden so the people in it will feel natural. Many people get so excited to design a landscape and a garden that looks good, they forget that the most important part is to design a landscape that actually works for their life. Let's figure out a way to clearly define your needs so your landscape fits your lifestyle. One place you can start is with a checklist. I like checklists. Things that will address your needs, like if you have terrible western sun, then you can talk about trees that shade windows in the house. And if you want to conserve water and conserve energy, if you're going to entertain or you're going to sit and sleep, this is where you might say you want it to remind yourself of a certain place, or you might want to use California natives or whatever state you're in. You're coming up with a checklist of ideas of what your needs are, and those needs can be wide-ranging. Once you are clear on what you actually need from your yard and want from your yard, you realize something else. The yard and the site itself might not agree with your plans. Here is how you figure out what works and what doesn't work for your space. And you might find out that there's even more opportunity than you ever imagined. So when I was first learning about this process, I thought this was the most boring part. It's probably the most important part, and it's the part that, if you embrace with some enthusiasm, makes the rest of the process much easier, because you start to solve problems when you do a really good job of analyzing your site, meaning everything about it. The views that you want to enhance, the views that you want to block, proximity to neighbors and windows of neighbors' houses, the issues regarding drainage, the issues regarding exposure, sun and wind patterns. You can kind of overlay the second step with the third step when you have this very detailed analysis of the site with all the opportunities and constraints. Then you can overlay your needs on top of that, and you start to already be along the way of designing without even having a headache, without even trying to be creative. That analysis will really help you come up with a design that meets your needs and creates spaces in a real useful way. Now that you have identified your needs and what your space can support, it's actually time to start designing. But this is where most people get a little over anxious and rush it. There are a few simple tools that make the entire process much easier and clearer. The next thing you would do is use bubble diagrams. We want to use bubbles of different sizes to start to lay out the landscape. We are thinking of all the features we want. So, if we know we're going to use a shaded area, that's its own bubble. So we identify what kind of space it is, what's going to go on there, and you're developing relationships between the bubbles. So the bubbles aren't just one on top of the other and in random spots. They're in the vicinities where you're thinking they most belong. If you're not sure where to start with the bubble diagram, start with the most obvious, and that is things that are a given. Your street, your driveway, your front door. And you might do more than one bubble diagram. You might keep doing bubble diagrams till you come up with relationships that really work and really reflect what you need in your landscape. There's one more step most people aren't likely to think about: how we move through a space. You can have beautiful plants and well-designed areas, but if the movement between them doesn't work, it's awkward and inconvenient, your yard won't feel or function right. This is what I suggest to address the circulation properly. This is an extension of the bubble diagram part. This is when you first start to convert bubble diagrams to forms. And so now you have to look back at all the information you've compiled and all of your goals, and you're going to decide what kind of circulation shapes you want, whether they're free-form or straight lines, and the priorities, the uses of the circulation. So where you expect the most people will have wider walkways than where you are going to more intimate spaces. We want to get an idea of where the circulation is, where it originates, where it ends, and how it passes through and drops off people where they need to be dropped off. Now, a part of the circulation is patios and courtyards. You have to start to design all of these spaces and include them now. It's easy to overthink this and come up with something more complicated than it needs to be and more decorative than it needs to be. If you look at the gardens that Thomas Church did, they are elegant and direct and not with fancy shapes. If you're enjoying the flow of this video so far, make sure you subscribe. We talk about soil health, smart landscape design, plant choices, and building outdoor spaces and gardens that improve your life and that Chip approves of. You can design a perfect design on paper, but none of it matters if what's underneath it isn't healthy. And I think I could say this is a part that I underestimated early on. And now I fully realize how important it is. So important, in fact, that I created an entire business around it. If you were going to have plants, if you're going to have trees, if you're going to grow anything, the most important part of that process is the quality of your soil. Nothing more important, and yet it seems to be overlooked. How do we define healthy soil? I think a lot of people think healthy soil is created by throwing some Miracle-Gro on your plants, and actually Miracle-Gro isn't good for soil. Not that it's terrible, but it doesn't help soil at all, doesn't build healthy soil. Healthy soil is soil that's fully alive with all kinds of beneficial complex microbes. Those microbes are bacteria, fungi, protozoa, good nematodes, earthworms, a whole soil food web. In order to create soil like that, you need to be feeding your soil. And we believe in feeding the soil. That's the best way to feed the plants, because it's the soil that has all the magic compounds and ingredients that are needed to keep plants healthy without pests and disease. So if I were to start over, I would make sure I address soil health with things like compost, compost tea, earthworm castings, our products. All of these have food for beneficial microbes, attractants for beneficial microbes, and some beneficial microbes themselves. So over and over, we had customers with problems related to soil. In addressing those problems, that's really the beginning of me creating the whole company of John and Bob's and the beginning of the products that you see now. And by addressing the soil, we found lots more success. John and Bob, yeah, John and Bob, yeah, John and Bob, say John and Bob. Even with healthy soil, some landscapes fail every single day. Not because of lack of planning, but because of water issues. Here are the most important things to know about water, irrigation, and drainage. For watering, we want to water as little as possible in terms of frequency and duration and have everything look good. That's contrary to what a lot of people do. They might go more by feelings, like it's hot, I gotta water every day. You rarely need to water every day. And that takes a little bit of work, either by checking the soil or feeling around with your hand or looking at your plants constantly, and you get an idea of what plants look like when they need water or when they have too much water. And for trees, if it's possible, we want to try to water deeply, because when we water deeply, we encourage roots to go down. And we don't want a lot of surface roots. Our goal is to put in good, properly functioning irrigation systems. And properly functioning irrigation systems include proper pressure, head-to-head coverage, systems that don't break. Head-to-head coverage means the spray of one sprinkler goes all the way to the sprinkler head of the next one, and the same for that one. So you have complete double coverage. So to make all of these three things a reality, it can be difficult to do if you don't do irrigation all the time. So that's why I frequently recommend hire at least a consultant on the design part of the irrigation system, and then that consultant can direct you on if you really want to install it yourself. So somewhat related to irrigation is drainage. Proper drainage is a key. That's something I would put more emphasis on if I were to start over, because when I started, I had the terrible experience of being sued almost right off the bat. Lots of factors were involved, but the bottom line is the site didn't drain properly. The drainage was so improper that it threatened the integrity of the house. So ever since then, we're out there making sure that we get good drainage as part of the overall strategy of the whole design. The best way is actually very simple, and that's through gravity flow. So if you can figure out a way not have to put a sump pump in or not have to put a fancy French drain in, that's the best way. And then secondarily, just for insurance, you probably do want to put in some kind of system that collects all the water that comes off your roof into some type of drainage system that takes the water out. And now, finally, we arrive at plants. But notice, we didn't start here. Once your needs are clear, your space is understood, your plan is mapped out, your soil is healthy, and your water is dialed in, choosing plants becomes a little bit logical, a lot of fun, and way less risky. Here's what you need to be aware of when picking out a plant. The ultimate size of the plant and the tree is important. If you want to enjoy the natural forms of plants, you can't be hacking them into submission. So you need to be picking things that don't get too big for their spot and that you can let grow. And it needs to be in concert with the size of your lot and the purpose of the plant. So maybe the purpose of the plant is to provide shade, so it needs to be a certain shape based on the exposure that it's shading. If you're limiting maintenance, there are plants that take less and more maintenance than others. If you're growing plants that produce fruit, that's going to have to be harvested. If you're growing things that bloom a lot of times you have to prune off dead flowers. And so all of these things can be considered, and this is part of the analysis that you've done in the past. So exposure is key, really a fundamental part of selecting plants. Where does that plant thrive? Does it like a lot of sun or does it like a lot of shade? Every part of your landscape has different exposures that are presented. Water needs, a really excellent topic where you need to think about like water needs together. If you're lucky enough to have a native California oak, you don't want to plant a bunch of azaleas under it. Azaleas need frequent water, and native oaks need infrequent water. Texture and color. Color can be accomplished with flowers. You could think about how you're organizing the bloom and combining blooms with color palettes. Or color can be about leaf color. There's lots of possibilities there. And once you start looking at leaf colors, then a lot of times texture comes into it too, because this combination of color and texture, where you have these big, bold, say, green leaves mixed with fine green and gold leaves, lots of possibilities there. And here are a few other tips for picking out plants. For me, lists are important because I find that my mind can get so jumbled considering all kinds of things here that the plants just aren't flowing. It'll give you inspiration to look at lists, because once you see plants, other ideas come to your mind. Then, if you come up with these great ideas, you have to see if they're available in your area. Now, if you can't find it at your local garden center or your local big box stores, you can order plants online and get every unusual plant there is if you're willing to pay for it. If I had to start completely from scratch, this is the exact order I would learn landscaping. Mindset first, planning second, and plants last. And if you'd like to see how I use modern tools to make that planning process easier, watch our video on using AI to design your yard. It won't design everything for you, but it can simplify key steps and really spark some ideas.